Follow your passion might be the most toxic bowl of chicken soup you've ever heard in your life, because it could be making you willingly accept exploitation and drift further away from real wealth. Hello everyone, today we're going to dive deep into a classic wealth book that topped the New York Times and Amazon bestseller lists in 2024, The Wealth Equation. This book is a guide to staying grounded in reality, tearing apart all such tender, sentimental lies. Its author, Scott Galloway, is a self-made serial entrepreneur and a star professor at New York University. Through countless mistakes he made in the first half of his life, he tells us that to achieve success, you shouldn't follow your passion, but your talents, because mastery is what brings true love. In the following time, we'll follow Professor Galloway to thoroughly dissect the wealth equation he proposed. Wealth equals focus plus discipline multiplied by time multiplied by diversified investment. This is not just a book about making money, but a hardcore survival guide on how to live a prosperous, self-consistent, and happy life in this cruel and realistic capitalist world. Earlier, we mentioned that this book is a guide to staying grounded in reality. Why is that? Because it immediately shatters one of our biggest myths about wealth. Many people think that making money is just about learning some financial knowledge, understanding investment skills, and being able to calculate various complex spreadsheets. If you think the same way, you might have fallen into the first big trap. The author of this book, Professor Galloway, is a living example. Just think about it. He has an MBA from a top business school, founded 9 companies, and raised tens of millions of dollars in funding for them. By all rights, he should be a smart person who understands money, right? But he admits that it wasn't until he was 42, at the moment his first son was born, that as he looked at everything in the delivery room, what he felt wasn't joy, but overwhelming shame. He had messed up. He could have had millions of dollars in savings, but he didn't. He had let himself down, and more importantly, he felt he had let down this newly arrived little life. So where exactly was the problem? Galloway says the problem isn't with intelligence, but with behavioral patterns. Financial freedom is not an intellectual exercise at all. It's the result of behavioral patterns. A study on consumers also found that although both a lack of financial knowledge and a lack of self-control can lead people to accumulate heavy debts, the data clearly shows that among these two factors, the lack of self-control is the real culprit. You see, this gets to the essence of the problem. Many of us, like the author when he was young, don't fail because we don't understand, but because we can't act. Every year at the beginning, we set ambitious goals, to keep accounts, to save money, to invest. But what happens? Most people's New Year's resolutions don't last more than a month. Why? Because we always try to use willpower to fight against our instincts. This state is too tiring and will eventually drain you. The author believes that there's a deeper force that can make us align our knowledge with action, and he calls this force character. The book puts forward a very important concept called the character and behavior flywheel. What does it mean? It means that character and behavior are bound together, like a rotating wheel. Your character determines how you act. That's one half of the wheel turning out. And what you do every day, in turn, shapes your character. That's the other half of the wheel turning back. This wheel can be a virtuous cycle that spins faster and faster, driving you upward, or a vicious cycle that leads you to decline, and the choice is in your own hands. This is actually the same as what we often call self-cultivation. Before you can manage your family, govern a country, or bring peace to the world, the first step is always to correct yourself. Wealth is just a natural result of successful self-cultivation. So you see, the question shifts from what financial skills should I learn, to how should I shape my character? To shape our character, we first need to clearly see who our biggest enemy is. You might think the enemy is poverty, your boss, or the rat race, but in Galloway's view, our biggest enemy is the consumer illusion carefully crafted by modern capital. This system knows exactly how to exploit our human weaknesses. Think about it. For 99% of human history, we lived in an environment of material scarcity. Most people lived to be less than 35 years old, and hunger was the number one killer. So our genes are engraved with a strong desire for sugar, fat, and salt. Because these were scarce resources in the past, once obtained, the brain secretes dopamine, making us feel pleasure and remember this feeling, so that we can look for it again next time. But now, we live in an era of material abundance, but our bodies and brains are still stuck in ancient settings. Capital takes advantage of this, flooding us with high sugar, high-fat junk food and various advertisements that stimulate our desire to buy. Once survival is taken care of, another stronger instinct comes into play: reproduction. One of the most important tasks for young people in their 20s is to find a partner, and attracting the opposite sex often requires showing off and consumption. The author tells a funny story about himself. When he was 23, working at Morgan Stanley, he got a $30,000 bonus in his first year. You should know that his bank account had never had more than $1,000 before. What did he do with this huge sum? He immediately went out and bought a BMW. To make himself look like a sports enthusiast, he even hung a pair of swim goggles on the rearview mirror, even though he only swam once a week. He didn't do this for convenient transportation or fitness, but to send a signal to the opposite sex: I'm strong, I'm rich, come date me. You see, these desires deeply rooted in our genes are being infinitely amplified by commercial society, making us willingly empty our wallets. So what can we do? Should we live like ascetics? Of course not. Drawing on ancient Stoic philosophy, the author proposes 4 internal practices for shaping character, or 4 virtues: courage, wisdom, justice, and temperance. First is courage. This is not just the bravery of fearing death, but more the perseverance to keep going, the inner strength to not fear poverty, failure, or embarrassment. Marketing and advertising love to exploit our fears and insecurities, and courage is the most effective weapon against all of this. Second is wisdom. Wisdom means being able to distinguish between what you can change and what you can't control. Just like that famous prayer: change what you can change, accept what you can't. You can't control the external environment, but you can choose how to respond to it. Third is justice. This sounds a bit grand, but it's actually simple. It means keeping others in mind and recognizing that humans are social animals who need to depend on each other. Only a person who is honest, upright, and dares to take responsibility for their actions can win allies instead of fighting alone. Fourth is temperance. The author believes that this is the most important and hardest virtue to practice in modern society, because the entire capitalist system is exploiting our weakness of lacking self-control and being obsessed with consumption. Temperance is the resistance and management of all these excessive behaviors. This still sounds quite abstract, right? Don't worry, here comes the most crucial step: how to put these virtues into action. The author offers a very simple but extremely effective method: slow down. Psychologist Viktor Frankl once said, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom." We make hundreds of decisions every day, from small ones like what to eat in the morning to big ones like how to reply to a harshly worded email from our boss. Our instinctive reactions are often emotional and thoughtless. But if you can pause for even one decision in a day, and in that tiny space between stimulus and response, tell yourself, "I can control this, my response is up to me." Then choose a more rational action instead of succumbing to momentary impulses. Then you have already taken a big step on the path of character cultivation. The author gives an excellent example. He says that if you find yourself particularly good at throwing parties, always managing to liven up the atmosphere, it doesn't necessarily mean you should become a party planner. You need to dig deeper, like a detective, into the underlying abilities behind this surface behavior. It might indicate that you have strong creativity, organizational skills, promotional and sales techniques, or even a kind of leadership that makes others willing to follow you. These are the valuable talents that can be transferred to various careers. So you need to analyze your successes, find the core skills behind them. That's where your talent lies. Finally, there's a cognitive blind spot about discovering talent that we must break. That is, we often severely underestimate our own talents because they come too easily to us. We can usually clearly see others' abilities and marvel at them because the tasks they accomplish are difficult for us. But conversely, we often take for granted the skills we master effortlessly and may not even realize they are a form of talent. So when your friends, colleagues, or family often praise you for doing something exceptionally well, but you yourself think, anyone with hands can do this, you should be alert. That's probably your talent shining, but you haven't noticed it yet. Alright, now we've clarified the issue of how to discover talent. So after gaining a clearer understanding of ourselves through these methods and roughly knowing where our talents lie, the next step is to perfectly match these talents with a career path that can bring us wealth. That's the topic we'll discuss in the next section, the correct way to make money. So, having found our talent, which path should we take to turn it into wealth? In this section, we'll talk about the correct way to make money and how to choose and manage your career. First, we need to establish a perhaps harsh but crucial understanding. In the face of the tide of the times, individual abilities are sometimes really not that important. The author uses an analogy. Choosing an industry is like choosing where to surf. A top surfer can't make big waves in a calm small pond, but an average person with decent skills can be pushed to unprecedented heights if they catch a once-in-a-century tsunami. Take the United States, for example. In the past decade, an average performing employee at Google may have a career development far exceeding that of an outstanding employee at General Motors. That's the power of trends. So especially in the early stages of your career, taking time to think and judge which industry is on the crest of the wave is far more important than just working hard with your head down. So how do we choose a specific career path? Based on his decades of experience in entrepreneurship, investment, and teaching, the author analyzes the truth behind several mainstream paths, which are full of practical insights. The first path, and the one most mythologized by the media and movies, is entrepreneurship. Many people think entrepreneurs are chosen by fate, with ideas to change the world and unparalleled abilities. But the author tells us, don't be naive. He has founded 9 companies and met hundreds of entrepreneurs. He found that most people choose to start a business not because they want to, but because they have to. They are often the kind of people who can't fit into large organizations, are restless, not good at accepting criticism, and can't stand trivial injustices. In other words, they are forced to start a business because they are not good employees. Of course, this doesn't mean they lack ability. On the contrary, these seemingly negative traits are exactly what entrepreneurs need. A successful entrepreneur must essentially be a top salesperson, because when the company has nothing, the only thing you can sell is your vision for the future. At the same time, you must have a strong sense of resilience, that is, the ability to get up again after being knocked down countless times. The author takes himself as an example. He ran for class president 3 years in a row in high school and failed to run for student council president, and even was rejected when asking a girl to the prom. But he has the courage to face rejection, which is the secret of his later success. Of course, behind the myth is a harsh reality. According to data from the US Bureau of Labor Statistics, 20% of startups fail in the first year, and less than 15% of new businesses can last 20 years. So the path of entrepreneurship is glamorous, but it's a matter of life and death. You have to think clearly. The second path, and the choice of the vast majority of us, is being an employee in a large company. Don't underestimate this path. The author clearly points out that if you can get into a top company like Goldman Sachs, Microsoft, or Google, seize that opportunity. Although many people disdain stable jobs in large enterprises, the knowledge they can teach you and the credentials they can add to your resume are hard to get elsewhere. Of course, to do well on this path, just being good at work is not enough. You also need to understand some rules of the game, have political skills to navigate the organization smoothly, win the support of senior management, and maintain a mature mindset when facing the inevitable injustices in the company. For employees, one of the most effective ways to accelerate wealth may be strategic job hopping. It's a harsh reality. External companies often value your worth more than your current employer because bosses tend to get tired of old employees. Take the United States, for example. Data shows that as of March 2023, the average salary increase for Americans who changed jobs in the past year was 7.7%, while those who didn't change jobs only had 5.7%. Although it may vary from country to country and the gap may change, it's almost an iron rule that job hoppers get higher salary increases. Of course, job hopping is a double-edged sword. Too frequent job hopping will make your resume look bad, and people will think you are unstable. So the strategy should be to stay in one place for at least 2 to 3 years, learn everything you can, extract all the value, and then jump to the next platform that can bring substantial improvements in your skills, position, and salary. The third path is a hidden track that is seriously overlooked by many people, especially the elite class, which the author calls the ground floor economy. You might think that those who make big money are tech tycoons and financial giants, but data shows that in the United States, most people who earn more than $1.5 million a year are not these people, but local business owners, such as car dealers, beverage distributors, etc. Small businesses in the United States contribute 44% of GDP and create 2/3 of new jobs, especially in technical fields where there are huge opportunities. Our society worships white-collar jobs that require top academic qualifications so much that it makes an entire generation of young people look down on these blue-collar jobs that can provide stability, high salaries, and real value. This is precisely the opportunity for ordinary people, a blue ocean market with less competition, but extremely strong demand. All right, we've chosen the track and started making money. How should we manage the money we earn and our most precious resource, time? This is the third magical element in the wealth equation, time. We'll continue this in the next section. In the previous section, we talked about how to invest our talents in the right career path to make money. But making money itself can't make you achieve financial freedom. What really widens the wealth gap between people is how you use the money you earn and how you utilize a resource that everyone has but most people severely underestimate, time. This is the third element in the wealth equation. So how exactly does time work its magic in the world of wealth? It exerts its power through a specific financial mechanism called compound interest. How powerful is compound interest? It's so powerful that even Einstein once said it's the 8th wonder of the world. The principle of compound interest is simply interest on interest. The interest you earn is added to your principal and continues to generate interest for you in the next year. This process is unremarkable at first, but after being amplified by time, the effect is amazing. The book gives an example. $100 with an annual interest rate of 8% will grow to nearly $1,006 in 30 years with compound interest, which is almost 7 times that without compound interest. A small seed has grown into a towering tree. And this is just with $100. If we increase the amount invested in the time, you'll see a more shocking picture, which may even make you anxious. The book does the math. Assuming in the United States, a person invests $12,000 every year with an annual return rate of 8% and only persists for 10 years, then stops and lets the money snowball on its own. If he starts investing at 25 and stops at 35, by the time he retires at 65, the money will grow to about $2.5 million. But if he misses the golden decade and starts doing the same thing at 45, stopping at 55, then by the time he's 65, the account will only have about $500,000. You see, with the same principal investment of $120,000, just because the start time is 20 years later, the final result differs by a full $2 million. This is the magic of time, cruel and fair. Warren Buffett accumulated 99% of his wealth after the age of 55, which precisely shows that letting the snowball roll long enough is more important than how big your snowball is at the beginning. So the author says, investing is like planting an oak tree. The best time to start was 10 years ago, and the second best is now. At this point, you may be excited and ready to start your compound interest journey immediately. But wait, the author reminds us that compound interest has an evil twin brother, which is also quietly eroding your wealth day after day in the same way. That thing is inflation. You must have felt that money is becoming less and less valuable. That's inflation, which is also calculated using compound interest. The book gives an example. If the inflation rate where you are is 3%, then something that costs $100 today will cost $243 in 30 years. This means that if you plan to retire in 30 years, you need to earn 2.5 times more than you do now to maintain the same standard of living as today. You see, on one side, compound interest, the angel, is helping your wealth snowball, and on the other side, inflation, the devil, is making your snowball melt. So our task is clear. The growth rate of our investment returns must exceed the erosion rate of inflation. The part that outperforms is called your real return. This also explains why we shouldn't keep large amounts of money in a bank's current account for the long term. Because the interest on current accounts usually can't outpace inflation. When you keep money there, although the number in your account doesn't decrease, your actual purchasing power, i.e., your real wealth, is shrinking every day. In other words, your savings are actually losing money. So in the long run, time is both our friend and our enemy. But to harness this power, we must return to the essence of time, to how we spend each present moment. We always think money is the ultimate currency, but the author tells us that the truly important currency is actually time. Think about it. The richest and the poorest people in the world all have the same fair 24 hours every day. Time cannot be reversed or borrowed. It is our most scarce and precious resource. How you use your time ultimately determines how much wealth you can have. The author tells a very shocking story about himself. About 6 years ago, he fulfilled a childhood dream, buying his own private jet. You must think this is a rich person showing off, but he says it was one of the easiest financial decisions he ever made. Why? He did the math. At the time, he lived in Miami, but had to fly to New York every week to teach and travel across the US for speeches. He calculated that with his own jet, eliminating all the time spent waiting in airport lines, going through security, and waiting for flights, he could gain a full 13 days every year. Owning the jet for 10 years would add up to 130 days, equivalent to over 4 months. He asked himself, at the end of my life, would I rather have an extra $12 million in my bank account, or an extra 4 months of memories with my sons? The answer was obvious. You may not be able to afford a private jet yet, but this way of thinking is completely replicable. You also need to start calculating your time. What is stealing your time? For example, grocery shopping. Many places now offer home delivery services. If you spend 3 hours a week driving to the supermarket, waiting in checkout lines, and driving back, That adds up to over 150 hours a year, equivalent to wasting 2 full weeks of daytime. Wouldn't it be more worthwhile to use those 2 weeks for relaxation or work? Moreover, the author bluntly points out that social media is probably one of the biggest wealth killers of our time. It deprives young people of their most precious time that could be spent working, studying, or engaging in real interpersonal interactions. Studies have shown that among 27 different leisure activities, social media ranks at the bottom in terms of improving happiness. So, maybe open your phone now, check your screen time report, and ask yourself if that time was worth it. The author himself is lazy. His secret is to outsource all services he's not good at or that aren't essential, then invest all the saved time and money into 2 things. First, striving to be top in the field where he can make money. Second, doing more things that make him happy. After calculating the time, let's calculate the money. You often hear rich people say, "I never worry about money." The author tells you, don't believe it. This is their way of showing off indirectly. Every rich person he knows cares deeply about money. They track, manage, and cherish every penny as if it were a rare treasure. So you must start keeping records too. There's a famous saying in management, whatever can be quantified can be managed. In the early stages of wealth accumulation, your 20s and 30s, keeping accounts is even more important than saving itself. Because this cultivates your sensitivity to the flow of funds and exercises your self-disciplined character. And never trust your memory or feelings. Psychological research has found that our brains are terrible at predicting expenses. People's predictions of their spending are often lower than the actual amount because we always overlook the endless unexpected expenses. So data is always more important than your intentions. You must plan based on the money you actually spent, not what you thought or planned to spend. So how to plan specifically? The author proposes a very simple and practical 3 buckets theory. Imagine your monthly income flows like water into 3 different buckets. The first bucket is the daily consumption bucket, holding money needed for basic living, rent, food, transportation, utilities, etc. This is your monthly baseline expenditure. The second bucket is the medium-term expense bucket, for things like a future down payment on a house, graduate school tuition, wedding costs, or an emergency fund. The third bucket is the long-term investment bucket, the cornerstone of your path to financial freedom. The money here will generate a steady stream of passive income through the compound interest we discussed earlier. Your task is, on the premise that the first bucket has enough, to channel as much water as possible into the second and third buckets. Finally, the author gives a special suggestion to young people. If you're in the first decade of your career, your 20s, you don't need to feel anxious about not having saved much. At this stage, your income is usually not high, and life is full of possibilities for experience. You should enjoy it. But you must start developing the habit of saving, even if it's just putting $10 into a savings account each month. This action is like exercising muscles in the gym. It cultivates your savings muscles and self-disciplined character. When you reach your 30s or 40s and enter your income peak, these well-exercised muscles will help you steadily receive large sums of income and effectively convert them into capital that creates wealth for you. All right. That's all about the dual magic of time. We must recognize its power of compound interest in long-term investments and learn to manage every minute and penny like managing a company in daily life. So when our long-term investment bucket starts to have some savings, how should we invest to make our money work safely and efficiently for us? In the next section, we'll enter the last and most hardcore part of the wealth equation, diversified investment. In the previous section, we learned how to manage time and money. When your long-term investment bucket starts to have savings, a huge world full of temptations and traps opens up investing. But before we start, It should be noted that the following investment content is derived from interpreting and sharing the views of the original author, Scott Galloway. The book has very detailed analyses of various assets. Here we can only outline the basics. For more details, you can read the original book. Alright, let's continue. We see legends of stock gurus online every day, as if being smart enough to pick the destined golden stock can make us reach the top overnight. But the author, with real money and hard lessons, tells you, stop dreaming. Trying to become a stock guru by yourself will most likely make you at chives to be harvested. Ordinary people win at investing not by IQ or skills, but by a nearly Zen-like wisdom. Let's start with a $1 million bet, starring the Oracle of Omaha, Warren Buffett. A few years ago, he publicly bet that an ordinary fund tracking the US S&P 500 index would outperform any portfolio of hedge funds managed by Wall Street elites over the next decade. The result? After 10 years, that unremarkable index fund had a total return of 126%, while the funds managed by elites had a mere 36% return. This story reveals a secret Wall Street hates to mention. In the long run, almost no one can consistently outperform the market. Data shows that over the past 20 years, 94% of large-cap funds in the US underperformed the S&P 500 index. So you see, the first layer of investment wisdom is to abandon the fantasy of man conquering nature and acknowledge our own insignificance. So what should we do? This leads to the second layer of investment wisdom, diversified investment. Here, the author shares two of his own unforgettable and painful lessons. The first was when he put all his wealth into his own startup, only to have the company go bankrupt when he was 40, losing 70% of his net worth and almost being reduced to square one. The second was when he sold his Netflix stock too early, missing out on a 50-fold gain. He says every time he sees Netflix's stock symbol, it feels like a shot to the chest. But here's the key point. Even though it felt like a shot, he's still alive. Why? Because he learned his lesson. His investment portfolio also included companies like Apple and Amazon. These diversified investments allowed him to stay in the game even after making a big mistake. These two stories vividly illustrate the true meaning of diversified investment. It's not an offensive weapon to pursue higher returns, but a bulletproof vest that protects you from surviving in the cruel market. Therefore, the author summarizes two golden principles. First, focus on increasing your current income. Second, invest diversely to accumulate long-term wealth. In your main career, you should be like a focused gambler, going all out. But the money you work so hard to earn must never be invested with the same gambler's mentality. You must put a bulletproof vest on it. We understand the principles, but how to put them into practice? The author shares a 3-step philosophy in the book that he personally highly recommends, which he jokingly calls the lazy person's investment method. Simply put, it's to open a low-cost brokerage account, put most of your long-term funds into low-cost index funds, ETFs, that represent the entire market, then keep investing and hold them for the long term. Behind this idea is a deep understanding of various investment tools. The investment products we can usually access are nothing more than stocks being a boss, bonds being a creditor, and real estate the king of assets. Faced with so many choices, ordinary people easily suffer from decision paralysis. So the author believes that for most people, the best choice may not be to pick one, but to directly buy a big gift package, what we often call ETF index funds. An ETF that tracks a major index allows you to hold stocks of hundreds or even thousands of companies with a single sum of money, automatically achieving risk diversification. Moreover, because it's passively managed by computers, the fees are extremely low. In the author's view, this hassle-free, cost-effective, and labor-saving tool is simply tailor-made for us ordinary investors. In terms of specific fund allocation, The book also provides an inspiring thinking model, which we can call the 82-style balance approach. The core of this approach is to imagine your long-term investment funds as two parts. For the larger portion, 80%, the author suggests investing in the aforementioned passive and stable core investment portfolio dominated by ETFs. This part is the ballast stone of your wealth, pursuing the average market return, which is actually long-term stable growth. As for the remaining small portion, 20%, the author thinks it can be regarded as your learning fund. You can use this money to try some individual stocks you personally favor or other investment products that interest you. The purpose of this part of the funds is not to make you rich, but to allow you to experience the market firsthand, learn to analyze companies, and understand your own emotions and risk tolerance under controllable risks. It's like practicing in the shallow end of a swimming pool. Even if you choke a few times, it's not dangerous, but you can learn the real skills of swimming. Alright, this concludes our in-depth reading of the wealth equation. Together, we've walked through this complete path to wealth, starting with the fundamental self-discipline to cultivate our character, then learning to focus, exposing the lie of passion, and pursuing our talents. Next, we mastered the dual magic of time, making good use of compound interest while managing it meticulously. Finally, we grasped the wisdom and methods of diversified investment. These four elements together form that simple yet profound wealth equation: wealth equals focus plus discipline, times time times diversified investment. But at the end of the book, the author uses a warm story to tell us that the ultimate purpose of this equation has never been to get a cold number. He recounts that in the last week of his mother's life, no matter how many quilts she covered herself with, she still felt cold. Only when he held her in his arms like his mother had held him as a child did her trembling subside. At that moment, he felt that all his struggles and pursuits in the first half of his life had meaning. Because the wealth he worked hard to gain gave him the ability, time, and confidence to be by the side of the most important person in his life when she needed him the most. This is perhaps the ultimate meaning of wealth. Hopefully, this interpretation has opened a new door for you. Thank you all for watching. See you in the next book.